Hi, Chas and Dave, purveyors of novelty Cockney knees-up fun, with a short string of hits during the 1980s. Maybe they're dismissed and looked down on as a novelty, one-trick Cockney pony, but I think there's more to them than that. I think that they really need to be reassessed and reevaluated. There's an Englishness to their music that I think should see them put alongside other documenters of English life, like Ray Davies of the Kinks, Ian Dury and the Blockheads, the Specials, Madness, Squeeze. So let's see if I can maybe change your mind and present to you a different take on Chas and Dave.
Phoned up last night, she was going spare. She was in a temper, pulling out her hair. Your sister's caught in a scrappy look. He said, Father, don't give her monkeys. This is what he said. Oh, I don't care, oh, I don't care, oh, I don't care if he comes round here. Got more beer in the sideboard here. Let mother sort it out if he comes round here. I said to him, mother, let me have a toilet dead. So he comes to the telephone, he wasn't half fancy. She's got no sense, a silly little cat. If he comes round here, there's gonna be a row. But oh, I don't care, oh, I don't care, oh, I don't care if he comes round here. Got more beer in the sideboard here. Let mother sort it out if he comes round here. I tell you something else, and always never got a job. He hangs around the betting shop, a lazy little yob. Mother says, calm down, Dad, he's all right. They're out there snogging in the passage all night. But I don't care, I don't care, I don't care if he comes round here. Got more beer in the sideboard here. Let mother sort it out if he comes round here. If he comes round here, I got more beer. Let mother sort it out in the sideboard here. Got more beer. Let mother sort it out.
So Chas and Dave, Chas Hodges and Dave Peacock, they were both born in Edmonton, North London, which means that technically speaking, they are not proper Cockneys. Because to be a Cockney, you've got to be born within the sound of Bow Bells, which is St Mary le Bow Church in the East End of London. Between you and me, I was born within the sound of Bow Bells. Anyway, I got most of my information about Chas and Dave from this book, which is written by Chas Hodges. It's called All About Us. It's a really good read. He's an entertaining writer, but it's his story. There's very little about Dave in here. Certainly nothing about Dave's background and upbringing. But anyway, I thought I'd kind of start at the beginning and tell you a little bit about the pair of them and their career they had before they got together. Before Chas and Dave were Chas and Dave, if you will. Because they both had really interesting careers in music before they met. So Chas grew up in North London with his mother Daisy after the death of his father. Now Daisy was a pianist. She played semi-professionally. She made a living at it. She played kind of music hall stuff in pubs in London, around the area of Edmonton, and was quite well respected. And she was really apparently quite good.
Yes, sir, that's my baby. No, sir, don't me maybe. Yes, sir, that's my baby now. Yes, sir, that's my baby. No, sir, don't me maybe. Yes, sir, that's my baby now.
That was a recording that Chas made of her in I think in the early 80s. But like most teenagers growing up in the 50s, Chas was unlikely to be able to avoid skiffle, which he didn't, and he joined a skiffle group called the Horseshoes when he was about 13. But when rock and roll broke, they quickly became a rock and roll band, and Chas was heavily influenced after seeing Jerry Lee Lewis play live. His first paying gig was with a group called Billy Gray and the Stormers, and they were a rock and roll band, and they played sort of summer seasons a summer season at Butlins, played in pubs and clubs, but it was with the Outlaws that Chas would probably get his first break. The Outlaws were Joe Meek's house band. Joe Meek was the UK's kind of answer to Phil Spector, a producer who sort of perfected the art of using the recording studio. And his biggest hit was probably with the Tornadoes when they did Telstar. And the Outlaws were very similar to the Tornadoes, that sort of instrumental early 60s rock music. But unlike the Tornadoes, they added sort of a country and western theme to their music. And not that they sounded country and western really, but it just meant that they added the sound effects of guns going off and horses stampeding and whips cracking. And this is their album from 1961. It's called Dream of the West, released on EMI. This is actually a repress, but it's great stuff. It's good fun. It's that sort of instrumental early 60s rock. Yeah, there's a picture of them on the back there. I don't know if you can see them. So he was only about 17 when he joined the Outlaws. And another youngster who joined the Outlaws shortly afterwards was a guy called Ritchie Blackmore. Now, Ritchie Blackmore is on this recording. This is from 1963. This is a single. Clearly, it's a single, you can see. It's not just an LP that I'm holding further away. So, yeah, this is called The Return of the Outlaws. I didn't know they'd gone anywhere. But, yeah, again, it's that sort of country and western influenced rock, instrumental rock music. And also, while he was with the Outlaws, Chaz got the opportunity to tour with various American performers that came over to the UK without their bands, and Chaz played bass. I should have said that. He played bass with the Outlaws, and two of his heroes he got the opportunity to work with was first Jerry Lee Lewis. And Chaz says he learnt a lot standing next to Jerry Lee Lewis and watching him play, because he couldn't work out how he played stuff when he listened to the recordings, but when he could see him and what he was doing with his fingers, he learnt a lot whilst watching him. And another artist that they toured with was Gene Vincent, and there is a recording, an EP, with Gene Vincent and the Outlaws, but unfortunately I don't actually have that. After the Outlaws, he joined a group called Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers. I think they'd already had an album out before Chaz joined. This is their album Driving You Wild from 1966. This isn't the original cover. There is a much nicer original cover. Why is it I always have the worst cover? But there is a nice one. This is on Music for Pleasure on EMI. This is mono. And it's a kind of an R&B soul rock music, and it's great stuff. What do they do on here? Is there anything of interest? Yeah, they do Another Saturday Night by Sam Cooke. There's a Wyland Man song, a Bill Haley song, Three Rooms with Running Water. Anyway, yeah, so that's Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers. Now, they toured Europe with the Beatles in 1965, 66. And while they were there, the Beatles played, well, Paul McCartney played them an early recording of the what's the album called? Revolver. That's the one, yes. Anyway, they would go on to record a version of the Beatles' Got to Get You Into My Life, which was put out in 1966. This is on Parlophone. Now, apparently, Paul McCartney produced this, and plays the piano on it. There is a story that they couldn't work out how to do the piano part, and so they gave him a bell and he came down to the studio. But if he produced it, that doesn't really sound quite right. Anyway, really nice version, a kind of an R&B version of Got to Get You Into My Life. Dare I say it, maybe better than the Beatles version. You know, it's more soulful. Anyway, so yeah, that was Cliff Bennett and the Rebel Rousers.
Everybody clap your hands now. Everybody in the whole wide place, come on and clap your hands for me now. When I tell each and everybody to stomp your feet, want everybody to stomp your feet. When I tell each and everybody to give me some assistance to yell out loud. Ain't love good, ain't love right. Ain't love good, ain't love right. When you hear the music.
Around this time, Chaz also got a gig playing as a session player, and he did a lot of work with Derek Lawrence. And Derek Lawrence was someone who came through working with Joe Meek as well. And he set up a studio producing a lot of music for mainly quite a lot for the American market. A lot of stuff was only produced to be sent to America as singles and almost as muzak to be played in elevators and supermarkets. But one of the records that Chaz plays on is this, Soul Survival, Soul Sounds. It's not really a band, it's a bunch of session players. And this is a great record of sort of Hammond organ soul music, funky soul, with sort of the stuff that Stax and Atlantic did. So this is from 1967, this one, and it's got covers of Last Night by the Marquis. It's got I Feel Good, Night Train, but it's also got a kind of a funky Hammond version of Sunshine Superman. And again, this is bass guitar Chaz played on this. And while he was with Derek Lawrence, he played on a whole host of different recordings and sessions. And there's a rather nice three-part collection of the Derek Lawrence sessions that was put out. And Chaz plays on a lot of these. And there's some very interesting stuff on them. So there's three... I don't know why I'm showing you that they're exactly the same cover with different colours. So Chaz plays on a number of these recordings on here. Interesting ones that he's on is from 1969, an early recording by Hot Chocolate, which he plays bass on, and also his the drummer who played with him with the Rebel Rousers, Mick Burt, who would go on to be Chaz and Dave's drummer, is also on this. There's all kinds of stuff, and they're really worth picking up. Interesting stuff, produced between 1965 and into the 80s, some of this stuff that Derek Lawrence did. And one of the groups that Chaz worked with was a group called Black Claw with Albert Lee, and there are recordings of that on this. There are a couple of singles that they put out that were sent, again American-only releases. I think Across the Great Divide, which is on here, was a single by the band that they did. And it was at this point that a guy that he met in 1963, in the back of a car, called Dave Peacock, came into Chaz's life in a more sort of solid way. As I said, they met in 1963, but it wouldn't be until about 1969 that they played together in Black Claw. Dave didn't record anything with them, but he played live with them. But Dave did have a career going at that point. In 1967, he plays on this, a group called the Tumbleweeds. This is London country music, 1967. It's covers of American country standards. You've got versions of Crazy on here, songs by Billy Sherrill and Marvin Rainwater, Mule Skinner Blues by Jimmy Rogers. So yeah, this is Dave's. Now, as I said, I don't know a huge amount about Dave's early career because it's not in this book. But whether he made any recordings earlier than 1967, I'm afraid I don't know. But the Tumbleweeds was his first group. Well, no, his first group he was in was called the Rolling Stones. Not the Rolling Stones, another Rolling Stones, but they changed their name because they thought the name was crap. Bad mistake. Anyway, so the Tumbleweeds, and they would still be together. So that was, from 1967. This is from 1970, and it's on the Phoenix label, and this is a song written with Dave wrote with Tom Fricker, called "Making My Way Back to Louisiana," and they've moved on very much from sort of cover versions of things. This is their own stuff. It's far more like a country rock. It's kind of got a funky groove to it.
Yeah, been a long night and I've been on the road and I ain't got a dollar to my name. Spent my money on a good time girl, but I didn't even know her name. It's getting kind of late and I'm cold and tired. I got a long way to go. I'm making my way back to Louisiana, heading for the old bayou.
So yeah, so that's Making My Way Back to Louisiana, Dave Peacock playing with the Tumbleweeds. At this point in 1970, Chaz joins Heads, Hands and Feet with Alvin Lee, who he played with Blackfeet. And they would make, they're kind of a country rock group. And they would make 3 albums. This is their first album from 1971. They did record an album in 1970, but it was scrapped. So that's their first self-titled one. Their second album in 1972, Tracks. And their final album, Old Soldiers Never Die. Is that what it's called? Yes. From 1973. And it was through playing with these that Chaz, when they were touring America, he felt really stupid recording or performing songs with an American accent, and the idea of touring America and pretending to do an American accent he really didn't like, and that's when he started to get the idea of wanting to record using his own accent, his own voice. Dave at this time was had moved on from the Tumbleweeds with Tom Fricker. And joined a group called Spike Island. And there is a recording of, it starts with Making My Way Back to Louisiana on here, which is, again, but again there's Jambalaya, Hank Williams, Too Far Gone, Nightlife on here, Mama Tried by Merle Haggard. It's like a lot of UK country music from this period. It has that sort of country rock stuff, but it's also quite mainstream country as well. So yeah, Spike Island, which is where Dave was born. It's an area of Edmonton, not to be confused with the area called Spike Island in Manchester. So yeah, Spike Island. So that's Dave's country band. Finally, I just want to show in this section an album that Heads, Hands and Feet recorded with Jerry Lee Lewis. This is the session recorded in London with great guest artists, and it has all of Heads, Hands and Feet. It's also got Peter Frampton on here, Rory Gallagher, Albert Lee, because he's on in Heads, Hands and Feet. You've also got, when Chaz isn't playing bass, you've got Klaus Vorderman playing bass on here. There's some great versions of songs on here. There's a really good version of Bad Moon Rising that he does with Chaz on bass. But the first time that Chaz and Dave would record together is on this album, and it's called Country Pie. It was released in 1972, and it's basically just Chaz on bass. No, it's basically Chaz on piano, Dave on bass, and Mick Burt, who he played with in the Rebel Rousers, and would be in Chaz and Dave as well, on drums. And this was recorded in an hour, apparently, and it's just basically Jerry Lee Lewis influenced rock and roll. So is it worth listening to? It's all right, but it's the first time that they would record together as a unit.
You got the right string, baby, but the wrong yo-yo. Somebody's knocking on my door. Well, I passed this morning by that hardware store. A brand new string for my yo-yo. Walked on down to that doctor and I got the string put on. He made a mistake, put the string on wrong. Though I did knocking on my door, you got the right string, baby, but the wrong yo-yo. My mama told me and my papa did too. Some of these women gonna be the death of you. Well, you better find out which of them you crave, son. Some of these women will take you to your grave. But if you see...
They would then become a group called Oily Rags, and they were put together, and what's the guy's name? This is an album by Teresa Brewer called In London with Oily Rags. So they've kind of got double billing. There they are, lovely picture. So this was produced by executive produced by Bob Thiel, or Bob Thiel, who founded Flying Dutchman Records, and at the time Teresa Brewer was his wife. So this was recorded in the UK, and it's got a collection of songs, some written by Chaz, some written by trying to say which songs were written by them. On the Flying Dutchman label. So you've got Up on Cripple Creek, which clearly is the band. There's Come Running by Van Morrison. There's Saturday Night, which is an Eagles song. But then you've got Hot Damn Home Wine by Hodges and Peacock. What else have you got on here? There's The Pilgrim, Chapter 33 by Chris Christopherson. And Get Yourself Together, which is another Chaz and Dave song. So that's the first sort of Oily Rags record with Teresa Brewer. They would do another one as Oily Rags with Oliver Edward Nelson, who's a jazz saxophonist. So this is from 1974. I'm not sure you can see, there's Chaz and Dave in there. But now this is a bit of a cheat. It's called Oliver Edward Nelson in London with Oily Rags, but apparently he never came to London. He recorded all his stuff in the US, so that's a bit cheeky. It's okay. It's got some sort of funky stuff on it, some stuff written by Chaz and Dave. Is it? Yeah. There's a couple of tracks they've written. But yeah, it's okay. It's jazz with a bit of rock thrown in, a bit of funk thrown in. Eventually, they would record together their first kind of solo album as Oily Rags. This was released in 1974. And it's not Chas and Dave. It doesn't have Mick Burt on drums. It's got a number of different drummers. I think it's got various people who played with King Crimson on it, actually. But again, it's sort of produced by Bob Thiele. Well, it's produced by Chas and Dave, but executive produced by Bob Thiele. It's on Signature label. And this is far from the kind of Cockney melding of music hall and rock and roll that Chas and Dave would kind of be famous for. This is much more like country rock. It's got covers of Chris Christopherson's Jody and the Kid. It's got Time to Kill by the band. It's got Holy Cow, which is an Alan Toussaint song. But it has got some of their own songs on here as well. And it's got a very interesting take on the old sort of music hall song Boiled Beef and Carrots. But instead of being all sort of upbeat and music hall, it's done as a sort of a slow country rock song. So yeah, it's a nice album. It's not really what you would expect from a Chas and Dave record, but it is Chas Hodges and Dave Peacock performing together.
Well, if you're feeling blue, you got no one to do, and you're out there hanging on the line. Don't you hesitate, 'cause it's never too late for you to come up and see me anytime. If your knees are knocking, feel like rocking, and there's no one to share that bottle of wine. Don't you feel sad, just call a cab and you can come up and see me anytime. If you want some action.
They also recorded this album with Big Jim Sullivan. Big Jim Sullivan was probably the UK's first sort of guitar hero. He produced a lot of guitar albums and influenced a lot of guitarists. And the interesting thing about this is that there's a number of tracks that are written by Chas and Dave. But interestingly, if I show you, there's a couple of them that are not actually say written by Chas Hodges. They say they're written by Joan Hodges. Now it could clearly just be a misprint. There's a mistake's been made, which is probably more likely than the fact that it was done as some kind of dodgy tax evasion thing, so that the money would go to Joan rather than Chas. But hey, his wife. But yeah, it's a nice album. This again, there's kind of all kinds of stuff on here. Some great sort of funky country funk on here. But yeah, Chas and Dave playing with Big Jim Sullivan.